Hi, I'm Tammy French. Today I'm going to talk to you about Chapter 6 from the textbook called The Art of Public Speaking by Stephen Lucas. The chapter is titled Analyzing the Audience. Before we go too far, I do want to remind you that if you want to watch this entire presentation with closed captioning, please visit the COMMUNIC8 submenu on the UW-TV website at uwwtv.org. So, analyzing the audience, also called audience analysis and audience-centeredness. Why? Why do we have to worry about this? Well, it's this notion that we're keeping the audience in mind at all times with our speech. That before we even begin speaking, we think of the audience. And again, I come back to the question, why? If I'm the one speaking and I'm the one putting all the time and energy into this speech, why can't they just listen to what I have to say? That's kind of the way we feel sometimes, right? But the truth of it is, think of yourself as an audience member. Think of how many things you've sat through, whether it's a lecture, whether it's perhaps something in a religious venue, perhaps it's something just kind of a lecture from your parents, perhaps it's meetings at work where you've sat there and you have just wondered why you are there. Your mind is wandering. You're kind of wishing you were anywhere else, right? And as a speaker, of course, that's the last thing we want. We don't want our audience to go through that. We want them with us. That's why we spent all the time putting together the presentation in the first place. So this chapter is talking about what we can do and things that we can think about and consider to make sure that we are being as audience-centered as possible. Okay, again, audience-centeredness, as you see, is that it's this notion that we're always thinking of our audience. We're always keeping them in mind. We're thinking about what do they know, okay? What are some of their values? What are some of the questions they probably have about my topic? What are some of the concerns they might have? The more I can tune into that, the better off I'm going to be. So let's talk a little bit about why I should do this, why I should go ahead and worry about who my audience is. Well, the biggest thing is that it's the audience who decides if your speech succeeds or fails. Now, this might seem actually very unfair, right? You're the one doing all the work, so why can't you decide if you succeed? Well, because they're the ones with the takeaways or the lack of a takeaway. If you get done with the presentation and your audience doesn't really remember what you said, they don't really remember what some of your main ideas were, they don't really know what they're supposed to do with the information you've given them, then boy, unfortunately, it's really not worked out the way it was supposed to. So in order for the audience to think of us as succeeding, we want to make sure that we can find some common ground with them. Again, put yourself back in the place of an audience member. When you're in that meeting at work or when you're in that class, if those speakers can somehow connect to you, lay some common ground that they have in common with you, boy, you're much more likely to stay with them, aren't you? So we're going to talk about some of the best ways to do that today. One of the things we have to remember is we have to kind of fight through this notion called egocentrism. Egocentrism is just sort of this idea that we're all kind of sort of wrapped up in ourselves, aren't we? And that sounds awful, it sounds horrible, but really what it means is, I mean, we only know what we know, and we know what we know, and so therefore we're going to try to share what we know, but they don't necessarily know the same things. Now, that's a very circular, convoluted way of saying that we have to make sure we're explaining ourselves. We have to make sure we're not assuming that everybody knows what we know. Let me give you an example. Whether you're a brand new freshman or whether you've been around campus for a couple semesters, perhaps the first time you've gone home or the first time you've talked with your parents after you had a conversation about, yeah, things are going pretty well, but Canvas is a little tricky. Boy, oh boy, I'm not so sure about that. But, you know, I blew off some steam down at the Williams Center, and that was okay. I picked up a Royal Purple on the way back, so I had something to read later, and it was good. Very possibly your parents or whomever you were talking to really weren't sure what you were talking about. With Canvas, Williams Center, Royal Purple, these are just quick examples of jargon that we have on our campus. We know all of those things and what they are and what they mean, but certainly people around us don't necessarily know. And so we have to remind ourselves to avoid egocentrism as much as we can, to sort of get out of ourselves and not only define our terms as we come across them, just in case people aren't clear, but to also make sure we're thinking about what this audience is and where they're coming from. Now, speaking of the audience, one thing we can talk about and think about a little bit is demographics. Demographics is a term I bet you've heard before. I like to think of demographics as a snapshot of the facts about you at this immediate point in your life, right? So for example, age is a classic example of a piece of demographic information. Now, if your birthday's tomorrow, that will change, right? But at least in this moment in time, that's a piece of demographics. Demographics can include things like your shoe size. It can include things like your occupational status. It can include your year in school, right? It can include all kinds of little bitty facts about you. Some might seem really irrelevant. Some might seem much more important. But demographics are kind of facts about us. And we know that demographics can help us as we strategize with our message, as we try to put the best message forward. You know, I chuckle sometimes when I see our campus assistants walking backwards on campus as they lead some new prospective students and their parents around. Those folks do such a good job, and if any of you are campus assistants, good job, hats off to you, because there's a lot of things you have to know. But one of the things that always impresses me the most, and not only on our campus, but other campuses I visited with my own kids who have been checking out schools, is how good campus assistants are able to tailor the information they're sharing with the group they have. So for example, sometimes people on these tours will be, seniors, high school seniors that are ready. They are ready to make a commitment to a school, and they're really at that point where they need to pick a college, right? And so the campus assistants can be much more informational about, well, here's what you need to do to apply, here's where you go, here's what you do, right? On the other hand, if some of these tours are being attended by maybe sophomores or juniors that are just starting to look around, but they really are now nowhere near that point yet, well, again, the CAs can accommodate to that and share other kinds of interesting things about campus. The same when they find out things like whether or not the students are athletes. Well, they can start talking about some of the various coaches and sports and things, or whether or not the students involved they've got a major selected already or not. And so, you know, based on the demographics of those students, they can really help to discern exactly what the most helpful information will be. We can use those tips ourselves as well, based on the demographics of our speech, okay? Now, the thing we've got to be really careful of when it comes down to demographics is stereotyping, which of course is sort of oversimplifying and assuming that everyone's just right at that same spot. I know when I think of stereotyping, I often think of my father-in-law, who is in his 80s now, late 70s actually. He'll kill me for saying that, but he's extremely, extremely technology proficient. He really knows what he's doing in terms of Facebook, in terms of all kinds of different Instagram things, and he's got his iPhone and all this kinds of stuff. And I think of my dad, who was just a little bit older than him, not technology proficient at all. I mean, sometimes working as TV was troubling for my dad. So to stereotype, you know, in this example, older men in their 70s as being one way or the other way regarding technology would be an error, wouldn't it? Because certainly there's two people in my own life who are polar opposites around that. So we have to be really careful about stereotyping and assuming that everyone that's the same age or everyone that has the same major is the same, because of course they're not. There can be a lot of differences, right? Now, not only demographics is something we should think about, but we should also think about the situation we're going to be speaking in. Now, most of what I say in these different chapter lectures has to do specifically with our COMM 110 class. But for just a moment, I want to take this out of college, and I want you to think a little bit about what it might be like to be doing some public speaking as a professional. Maybe, again, you're working for a company, you've graduated, you've got the job you've wanted, which is awesome. And your boss taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, I would like you to talk about this project you're working on, and I want you to, come with me to this meeting, and then just fill people in. And you're excited but a little nervous, right? So one of the things you really need to find out is a little bit more about the situation, not just the demographics of some of the people you're talking to, but also the situation. So for example, size. How many people will you be speaking with? If you assume you're speaking with a small group of like 10 people and you get there and there's 100 people, well, not only will that perhaps make you nervous, but it might also be a problem in terms of, gosh, maybe you only made 10 handouts and now you're really up a creek, right? We would perhaps alter the method and mode of our delivery given different sizes of different audiences. Also, the physical setting. Are you assuming that you're going to be speaking in a conference room, and then it turns out in kind of a circular conference room, and it turns out you're in more of a classroom that have lines of chairs? Well, again, depending on what you're going to be doing with your talk, that could really impact things. Also, the physical setting could be important when it comes to technology. We want to be careful about assuming that you're going to have the ability to perhaps show a PowerPoint or the ability to walk around in between people and in between tables. You have to find out exactly what that physical setting is going to be like. So finding that out ahead of time could really save some problems. The last thing in terms of the situation is finding out a little, as best you can, about the disposition your audience will have towards the topic, yourself, the speaker, and the occasion. And what this means is sometimes if you know ahead of time, going in, that people are, a little bit angry about something or a little bit in favor of something, it can really alter your strategy. My husband works in human resources, and so from time to time he'll have to do actually some fairly large presentations where he's perhaps going in and he's letting people know, hooray, we're offering you a new benefit. And of course, people love more benefits, so they're very happy to hear that. And on the other hand, sometimes he's got to go in, sadly, and explain to people, I'm really sorry, but this is a benefit we have to take away. And of course, people are not happy about that when that happens. And so keeping those kinds of dispositions in mind can really be beneficial. If you know that perhaps people have been looking forward to a specific occasion that you're going to be speaking at, well, you can use those good vibes to help carry you as well, versus the opposite if it's a different kind of occasion. So the situation is a really important thing to keep in mind also as you not only analyze your audience, but analyze the whole speaking event as a whole. People's attitudes are so important, and also sometimes hard to get a handle on. The way that people feel about something and the frame of mind they have about something can be really tricky. My best suggestion is that you talk to the person that asked you to speak. So for example, the scenario I gave you a little while ago was that your boss asked you to come along with you to a meeting that he or she was going to, so that you could explain something that you were up to, right? Well, talk to your boss a little bit about these people. Are these people kind of excited about this project? Are they not really happy that this project is happening? What are some of their attitudes towards us and towards the project as a whole? That can really give you a leg up in terms of how you strategize your speech. Now, let's spend just a little bit more time talking about, okay, I've got some thoughts about my audience. What can I do about it? Let's talk about adapting to your audience before your speech even begins. So in other words, you're at the point of where you're still putting together your speech outline. You're thinking of exactly what needs to go into that outline and what things I should include, what things I should make sure are in there. And those are the kinds of thoughts you're having. You want to do your very best to kind of assess and think about how will your audience respond. You want to think about put yourself in their shoes. How will they think about my topic? Do you think they'll like your topic? Do you think they'll be interested in your topic? Are there things you can do to make your topic more interesting? Okay. You want to make sure your speech is very clear and convincing, that your credibility is solid. The biggest thing I want you to think about before your speech is actually coming due, in other words, you're still working on the outline part, is how you will connect to your audience. I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but audience connection is really, really, really important. And it's something you should really do in your introduction of your speech, as well as somewhere in the body of your speech. You explain to your audience how this topic relates to them in some way. What can they get out of this? Now, maybe your speech is, oh gosh, you want to inform your speech about the country of Aruba. Let's say you took a trip there and you thought it was great, and so you're going to inform people about Aruba. Okay, fine. How many people in your COMM 110 audience do you think also have been to Aruba? Maybe not many, right? Maybe none. So does that mean, well, I can't possibly connect to them then? Of course not. Whether or not they've been exactly to the place you're going, you can still relate some of the things that you're going to be talking about to similar values and experiences and attitudes that they currently have, perhaps about a different place, okay? Perhaps some common interests. So for instance, maybe in the introduction of your speech, you would say something like, one of the things we all seek is a place where we can relax, a place where we can forget about our problems for a while, a place where we can just kind of enjoy our environment and soak up maybe the sun and some of the great culture in the area. Where is that for you? Well, for me, I happen to find that great tranquil spot in the country of Aruba. Okay, so doing something along those lines lets the audience know that, hey, probably everyone has a spot, at least I hope so, that they find just very peaceful and very serene and very, again, relaxation filled, if you will. For the speaker, it happens to be Aruba, but it's okay if you haven't been there. You can still relate to some of the things I'm going to say. At least that's kind of the point, right? So find a way to connect to your audience. Build that into your outline so that you're making a concerted effort to make that audience connection. Identify some of those common interests, those common values, and those common experiences. That will be very helpful. Now, it's during the speech, okay? You're up there and you're giving your speech. What are you supposed to do for audience analysis at this point? Well, some of this comes back to being prepared and being able to work through any unforeseen circumstances. One of the things that happens, I see happen from time to time, and I think it can happen, frankly, in any different venue, is when the person who is speaking before you talks about either your same topic or a very similar topic. Part of you just wants to crumble up and say, oh no, that wasn't supposed to happen, right? It really can be a confidence shaker. But again, folks, be gracious and be grateful. Compliment the person that went before you. Say, wow, I'm really, really glad Mary was able to introduce the topic of Nike tennis shoes to you, because now I can dig even deeper into that topic for you. So thank you, Mary, great job. And then you take off. Be very polite and just roll with it, and people will be very, very glad to have you do that. The other thing you should do is, as you're giving your speech, make sure you're watching the nonverbals of your audience. Watch them, read them, see what they're doing. Are they with you? Hopefully they're with you. But if they're not with you for any reason, I don't know, maybe you see more than, I guess, a handful of people starting to be a little restless. Maybe that's the time, again, depending on what the setting is, if you're at work and giving a presentation, to take a little break. Maybe if you're in COMM 110 and you're only speaking for a few minutes anyway, maybe you throw in an extra example. People tend to love examples, particularly personal examples. And so watch and read your audience. Maybe you need to speak up a little bit. Sometimes we speak at our normal volume and we think it's fine, but it turns out we actually have a kind of a quiet voice. And if you watch the people in your audience, you can see them kind of straining to hear you. So watch for that sort of feedback as your speech goes on. Finally, after the speech. Now you're thinking, Tammy, if the speech is done, why do I need to adapt? Well, because you're probably still going to give more speeches, whether, again, you're in COMM 110 or whether you're working as a professional. There may be more speeches to come, and we can always learn something from our earlier speech experiences. So if it went fantastic, that's awesome. What can you repeat and what can you copy so that it goes really well next time with your audience? Did they seem like they were really with you? And again, if so, what can you do? Maybe it didn't go so hot. Well, how can we dig into this and dice this out a little bit to figure out exactly what didn't go so well? Maybe you needed a few more connectors in there to make sure the audience was with you a little bit longer, okay? In any case, chapter 6 has to do with analyzing that audience. Remember, the biggest thing is it's the audience that decides if you succeed or fail. So we really want to make sure to hit our speech, any speech we do, hit it out of the block and think about those people we're talking with so that we can really do our very, very best to connect with them and make our message heard. We spent a lot of time creating the message. So above all, we want to make sure that message is listened to. I want to thank you very much. And before we go, I want to just remind you that if you want to watch this presentation with closed captioning, please visit the Communicate submenu on the UWW-TV website at uwwtv.org. Take care.